Hello guys, Happy New Year first of all. Now, in the previous videos, we have covered three various topics. Firstly, what is an MUN, how to MUN. Secondly, the international press committees in an MUN. And thirdly, the Indian committees. Now, I welcome you all to the fourth video and the next point of Munning series. Now, when a new timer or first time munner goes into an MUN conference, the first thing which he'll notice is while sitting in that opening conference, he'll hear murmurs about moderated caucus, sub-moderated caucus, agendas, country, and then comes this word, the foreign policy. Now, what is foreign policy? Why is foreign policy crucial in an MUN? First, let us discuss why MUNs have this concept of foreign policy. Now, foreign policy is something which distinguishes between a conventional debate and an MUN. We have heard time and again that conventional debates are way better than MUNs because they give you that space to put forward your ideas, to speak your mind, to solve the problems. Whereas in an MUNs, the foreign policy make one thing very clear to you, that even if you have this simplistic idea, will this idea be dynamic enough to solve that economic or financial or whatever crisis in the real world geopolitics and the dynamical move. So, let us define foreign policy. There is no clear cut definition of a foreign policy. We can say foreign policy is basically a stance of a nation on an agenda. Now, let us take three examples. Firstly, supposingly you are in UNGA Dissect Committee and you are South Africa. What is your policy? Anti-nuclear disarmament or pro-nuclear disarmament? Obviously pro-nuclear disarmament, right? Now let's change the question. You are DPRK. What is your policy? Anti-nuclear weapons, anti-nuclear disarmament, right? Now comes the third and the most crucial part. Supposing you are Switzerland. What is your foreign policy now? Your foreign policy is neither this way nor that way. It's somewhere in the middle. It supports nuclear disarmament but doesn't want a global zero as of now without dialogue. It's a neutral policy. That's why foreign policies have their own advantages and disadvantages in an MUN. So how to formulate a foreign policy when I go to an MUN? Now there are 3 or 4 points which play a crucial role in defining your country's, your portfolio's foreign policy. The first of it is the history of the nation. History is the most crucial point for a foreign policy. Now let's take an example of South Africa in Nuclear Disarmament Committee again. You're South Africa. When you read your history, you'll realize that South Africa was the only nation which possessed nuclear weapons. Active warheads, not one, not two, 6, and the 7th one was being built. But then came the turning point. Before NPT, they could sign or ratify NPT, they had to do this nuclear disarmament. The Parliament of South Africa passed this act or passed this bill which became an act which provided for nuclear disarmament. Now realize, from anti-nuclear disarmament to pro-nuclear disarmament in no time. That is South Africa for you. That is why history plays a crucial role. Whatever committee, whatever agenda, whatever your portfolio, always look back at history. Always do extensive research on history. But history has its own disadvantages as well. History is not dynamic, it is static. That means in 2 decades time, your foreign policy may go 5 or 10 changes. 5 or 10 changes in 2 decades time. That is your foreign policy in history. So history plays a crucial role, but at the same time, history is not that relevant to the foreign policy as the next point is, the politics. Now we have 2 types of politics, domestic politics and international politics. The domestic politics is something which defines your country's stance, your foreign policy to its extremes. If your parliament decides to sway away from their foreign policy and passes a resolution or act or a bill, then your foreign policy changes. There's a regime change, the foreign policy changes. Let's take up an example of Nepal. Before elections in Nepal, the previous government was neutral, the foreign policy was neutral, but that was inclined towards India rather than China. But then foreign policy changes, international politics, that is India's certain interferences on border areas, etc., etc. Let's not go into that. caused the government change. In the recent elections, the Communist Party came into power. Now, the left wing of the Communist Party is as well neutral, no doubt, but more inclined towards China, right? So that is how domestic politics affects the international politics. Excuse me. Now, second part, the international politics. The international politics is, as you have now known, that is affected by domestic politics, but international politics has something which connects it to history as well. The bilateral agreements, the multilateral agreements or treaties, etc., which have been signed in past, play a crucial role in defining your foreign policy. Why? The bilateral agreement, multilateral agreement, treaties, economic treaties, financial treaties, social cultural treaties have a crucial role because if you deviate from them, you're technically deviating from laws. So international politics is defined by these certain things, and they may be affected by domestic politics, but at most of the times overrules the domestic politics. The politics is based upon government policies. The government policies can never succeed these agreements. Although in certain conditions we have exceptions, and that are led to various consequences as well. If you breach international law and the United Nations Security Council's politics is overcome, then economic sanctions or maybe intervention is on your way. Well, let's not go into that again. We'll make a separate video for that. Third part is the most crucial for a delegate like you researching for a committee who has very less or limited time, who cannot give so much time to history or politics, treaties, etc. If you have a conference 1 week away, I'll suggest you that don't go into these first, go into this first, the United Nations. Now the United Nations has meetings which are made public and certain meetings of Security Council or closed door conferences which are not made public. Let's not go into the closed door conferences. The open door conferences which are made public, you'll easily get the statements or the speeches of your nation on that agenda in United Nations. You'll get resolutions and you'll get voting patterns. The statements and the speeches are the most crucial part of your foreign policy because it's like reading your ministers, real life ministers' speech, which is exactly what you have to execute in that MUN. Alright, so understand how crucial a statement or a speech or a comment, etc., or a press release is for your nation. If your nation has made speeches, statements, press release, that means they have done work a lot easier for you. Secondly, the resolutions. Now there are two things. First is if your country has authored any resolutions, right? If your country has authored the resolution, you can do one thing, you can download the resolution, read it up, and then have the press release of that meeting. You'll realize the clauses are well defined, the speeches simplify the clauses of the resolution for you. Because the resolution which is being authored basically means what your country wants to achieve. Resolution is basically the action plan to solve the agenda. And that is what your nation has decided upon, that it wants to follow this action plan. That is way easier for you to do instead of interpreting so many things. But the best delegate or the perfect delegates have everything done. But let's go into the other part. Supposingly your country has not authored any resolutions, then what? Now look at the speeches and the statements made in that meeting, then go and read the voting pattern of your country on that resolution. Alright, the voting pattern, whether present and voting or abstention or against or not voting at all, which is generally not the same, defines a lot about your resolution and foreign policy. So this is UN, this is politics, and this is history. If you want to achieve great things in an MUN, take care of all three. Now comes the fourth thing, which is actually my personal secret, which most mothers don't do. Alright, that is a policy paper. What is a policy paper? A policy paper is basically all these stuff written down in proper formatted manner so that in an MUN when you're sitting with loads of research in your bag or in your laptop, you don't have to go through all the sheets again and again. You can just refer to your policy paper and understand, yes, this is my policy, I'll have to speak this. Then you can analyze the situation. Now the pattern of the policy paper is nothing because it is not submitted to the executive board. It is for your personal convenience. What I used to do is that I used to in bullet form mention the historical facts, the politics, domestic and international, and the UN statement, speeches, resolution, numbers, etc. Then I would, on the last page, analyze and write down the subtopics or the research points which I have done. What would happen is that in those three sheets, I cover the history, the politics, the international agreements, the UN speeches, and subtopics on what I want to do. What you can do is, in an MUN, you can go, you can refer to it, and you can easily analyze what you are going to speak. Because otherwise, it is very tremendously hard for you to go through all those pages again and again and again to find that one point which you want to make. It's better, and especially if you're in large committees, make a policy paper and refer to it. Now, with this, we come to the end of this crucial video of foreign policy. The next video which we are going to make will either be on substantive chits or international relations or international law. Thank you.